Dr. Alice Moore stepped off the landing shuttle onto Caro's 9, and the air itself felt like it was watching her. It was thin, cold, and carried a strange metallic scent that did not belong to any world she had studied before. Behind her, engineer Noah Grant checked the equipment crates one more time, while pilot Ethan Hale stayed near the shuttle, eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting something to move before it should. The mission briefing had been clear. Observe only. Record everything. Do not interfere. The Varkai were not considered intelligent in a human sense, but they were not simple animals either. They hunted in groups, communicated with layered calls, and showed patterns that suggested something close to early structure. That was why humanity was here, not to change anything, but to understand. The base camp was set on a wide rocky plateau overlooking a deep canyon system. From above, the land looked cracked open, as if the planet had once been broken and never fully healed. Alice stood at the edge of that plateau on her first evening, watching the distant movement of shadows below. The Varkai did not show themselves fully, but she could see signs of them: disturbed dust trails, broken stone paths, and the occasional low call that carried too far for comfort. Noah joined her with a data tablet. "Everything is stable," he said. "No signs of direct approach yet." Alice nodded but did not look away from the canyon. "They know we are here," she said quietly. "That's not confirmed," Noah replied. She finally turned her head slightly. "It doesn't need to be confirmed." Ethan, who had just walked up behind them, gave a short laugh. "We're in orbit of a predator world. Everything here knows everything." That night, the base was quiet. The only sound came from distant winds moving through stone channels below. Inside the temporary shelter, monitors displayed heat signatures and movement patterns. Most of it was predictable: hunting routes, pack movements. Alice studied those moments carefully. She had seen enough alien biology to know when something was more than random behavior. The Varkai were not just reacting. Sometimes, it felt like they were choosing. On the third day, the team split tasks. Noah stayed at the base analyzing long-range scans. Ethan maintained shuttle readiness in case of emergency. Alice went with a small drone unit toward a lower ridge for closer observation. The drone hovered ahead of her, sending back live visuals. The canyon below her path was deeper than it looked from above. Layers of stone formed natural tunnels and collapsed arches. She marked several nesting zones where Varkai movement had increased. The data was promising: this world was full of structured survival systems. Then she saw something unusual. A set of tracks led away from the main pack routes. Smaller, uneven, fast-moving. Not adult patterns. Cubs. Alice paused. She zoomed the drone's camera and followed the direction of the tracks. They disappeared into a narrow rock split near a destabilized cliff face. The scan readings spiked slightly. The ground there was weak. She spoke into her comm, "Noah, I'm seeing juvenile movement in Sector 4, near the lower ridge." Noah responded after a short delay. "Mark it. We'll let natural tracking continue." But Alice did not move away. She kept watching the narrow split in the rock. The wind shifted suddenly. Dust fell from the cliff edge in small streams. Something was wrong with the structure. Ethan's voice came in over the channel, slightly sharper. "Alice, confirm you are stationary." "I am stationary," she replied. A low vibration passed through the ground. Not an explosion, not an impact, something deeper, like the planet adjusting itself. A second later, a section of the cliff above the split fractured. Stone cracked, slid, and collapsed into the narrow opening where the tracks disappeared. Alice reacted instantly. "Collapse event," she said. "Possible entrapment." Watching her signal weaken. Noah stared at the data readings, realizing they were no longer just observing a system anymore. Inside the collapsing canyon, Alice kept moving forward. And the planet kept falling around her. The canyon did not collapse all at once. It failed in stages, like a slow breath turning into a choke. First came the deep vibration through the ground, a low rolling force that made every instrument on the ridge base flicker for half a second. Then the rock face above the narrow split began to crack in long, sharp lines. Dr. Alice Moore saw it before anyone else could react properly. She was already close to the entrance, where the cub tracks had led. The ground under her boots trembled again, stronger this time. Dust rose in thin waves from the cliff walls. Small stones fell first, harmless at the start, but growing heavier with each second. Seismic instability increasing, Noah Grant said over the comms. His voice was tight now, no longer calm analysis. Alice, move away from the ridge line. That is a direct order. Alice did not answer immediately. She was looking into the narrow split where the cubs had gone. The sound from inside was clearer now, sharp calls, high and broken, repeating in uneven patterns. Not panic alone. Something more structured, like they were trying to gather or stay together. Ethan Hale's voice cut in next, louder. Alice, we're seeing structural failure across the entire section. That canyon is going to close. Still, she did not step back. Instead, she adjusted her field emitter again. The small device in her hand was never meant for full structural support. It was a temporary stabilizer for sample collection in weak environments. But she pushed it beyond its limits, increasing the output until the air around her shimmered slightly with distortion. Noah noticed it immediately. You are overloading the unit, he said. It will burn out. I know, Alice replied at last. Her voice was calm. Too calm for the situation. Another tremor hit. This one was stronger. The rock above the split shifted visibly, like something massive had pressed down from above. The entrance began to narrow. A long crack split down the center of the cliff face and spread outward like a web. Ethan turned toward the shuttle controls. If that seals, we lose her and everything inside. Alice, you have maybe seconds. Alice finally moved forward. She stepped into the split. The moment she crossed the threshold, the temperature dropped sharply. The canyon swallowed light quickly. The walls were close enough to touch on both sides. The sound outside became dull, replaced by echoing vibrations from deeper within. The cub calls were louder now. They were just ahead. Noah watched from the base monitors as her signal shifted from stable to unstable. Her body cam feed showed broken angles of rock and narrow passage. Dust filled every frame. Why is she still going in? Ethan asked, almost to himself. Noah did not answer right away. His eyes were locked on the data. She is prioritizing extraction of biological life over protocol compliance, he finally said. That is not what I asked, Ethan replied. Inside the canyon, Alice moved carefully, placing each step with precision. The field emitter was working at maximum capacity now. The shimmer around her hands and upper body showed how thin the protective field had become. Any more strain and it would fail completely. The passage opened slightly ahead. She saw movement, small shapes pressed against a fallen slab of rock. The Varkai cubs were trapped there, their bodies wedged between debris and collapsed stone. They were smaller than she expected. Covered in layered natural armor, but still vulnerable. Their eyes reflected her light as she approached. Another vibration ran through the canyon. This one was deeper. Alice looked up. It was not dramatic. Not emotional. Just a simple statement. Ethan slammed a hand on the console in the shuttle. She's going to get buried. Noah's hands hovered over the controls, as if he could pull her back through the signal itself. Alice, confirm extraction status. No response. She was already kneeling beside the cubs. The field emitter flickered as she extended it to cover them as well. The energy demand spiked instantly. Her suit displayed warnings across the side of her vision. Power failure approaching. Structural collapse imminent. Oxygen usage increasing. She ignored all of it. The cubs pressed closer together, reacting to the protection field. One of them made a soft sound, low and uncertain. Not a call of aggression. Something closer to confusion. Above them, stone groaned loudly. The canyon was dying. Alice placed one hand against the rock blocking the cubs. It was too heavy to move, too embedded in the collapse. She scanned quickly, calculating. There was no direct way to free them in time. So she did something else. She shifted the field emitter again, redirecting its output into a narrow directional push against the debris above them. The system immediately warned of overload. The device was never meant for structural displacement. Only stabilization. Still, she forced it. Outside, Noah saw her signal spike and then begin to degrade rapidly. She is collapsing her own support field, he said, voice rising. If she keeps this up, she won't have any protection left. Ethan stared at the fading readouts. She's choosing them over herself. The canyon responded with violence. A massive crack split through the ceiling. Light from above disappeared as the upper rock layer fully detached. Inside, dust exploded into the narrow passage. Alice moved without hesitation. She positioned herself between the falling structure and the cubs, increasing the field output one last time. The strain was immediate. Her system alarms went silent, not because things stabilized, but because the system could no longer calculate safely. Noah's final view of her signal showed one steady point surrounded by collapsing data lines. Then the canyon sealed. The feed did not show impact. It only showed loss of signal as solid rock closed over the narrow opening like a closing eye. Ethan stepped back from the console slowly. Noah remained still, staring at the last frozen fragment of data. The canyon had gone quiet again. But nothing about it felt stable anymore. Inside the sealed canyon, the world changed in a way that felt like it had stopped obeying normal rules. Rock pressed in from every side. The air was tight and cold, filled with dust that refused to settle. What had once been a narrow passage was now a closed space of broken stone and fractured silence. Dr. Alice Moore stood in the center of it, surrounded by darkness and the faint glow of her emergency field emitter. The device was no longer stable. It flickered in uneven pulses, casting shifting light across the trapped Varkai cubs. The barrier it created was thin, almost fragile, but it was enough to hold back the sharpest edges of falling debris. The cubs stayed close together. Their small bodies pressed against each other instinctively, reacting to fear in a way that did not need instruction. They did not understand the situation, but they understood safety when it appeared. Alice had become that safety. Above them, the canyon groaned again. A deep sound rolled through the stone like something alive turning in its sleep. Dust drifted down in slow waves. Every vibration told the same truth, the structure outside was fully collapsed now. There was no exit left. Alice adjusted the field emitter again. The device responded weakly. Its energy reserves were draining faster than the system could recover. She checked her suit display. Power was dropping, oxygen reserves were stable for now, but the real danger was structural pressure. The canyon was compressing slowly, like a fist tightening around them. She looked at the cubs. There were 4. One was smaller than the others, pressed slightly behind the group. It made a low sound, almost like a broken call. Not loud enough to carry, but enough to show it was aware of danger. Alice moved closer and lowered herself into a crouch. The field barrier shifted with her, maintaining its thin protective dome. Her hands were steady, but her breathing was controlled and shallow. She was calculating constantly, time, pressure, energy, survival probability. Everything reduced to numbers, but none of them gave a good outcome. The canyon shook again. This time, small fractures appeared in the barrier field itself. Not from the outside, but from internal overload. The emitter could not sustain both stabilization and protection for long. It was never designed for this level of stress. Alice knew it. Still, she did not stop. Outside, far beyond the sealed stone, Noah Grant sat frozen in front of the main monitor. Ethan Hale stood behind him, hands clenched, staring at a dead signal feed that refused to update. The canyon had gone silent on all systems. No movement. No transmission. Only a static frozen point where Alice's last position had been recorded. "She's still inside," Ethan said quietly, as if saying it softer might change something. Noah did not answer immediately. His eyes stayed fixed on the final trace of energy readings. "She is alive," he said finally, but his voice did not sound certain anymore. Inside the canyon, time became difficult to measure. There was no sunlight, no wind, no external sound. Only the low hum of the failing field emitter and the distant pressure of stone settling into final position. Alice activated her personal comm unit. It was weak, and interference from the collapsed structure distorted the signal. She checked the cubs one more time. They were still breathing. Fast, shallow, but present. She leaned slightly closer to her wrist device. Her voice came through calm, even, without panic. "They are still breathing." The message transmitted upward through layers of rock, weak and broken, but it reached the surface systems in fragments. Noah heard it first. Then Ethan. There was a pause after the transmission. A long one. The kind that did not belong to machines or systems, but to human understanding that something had crossed a point of no return. Inside, Alice lowered her hand. The field emitter gave a final warning pulse. Its light flickered rapidly now, unstable and fading. She shifted her position slightly to shield the cubs more directly. Her body became part of the barrier's structure, not by design, but by necessity. The smallest cub pressed closer to her leg. It did not understand words or sacrifice. It only understood warmth and protection. Another tremor passed through the canyon. This one was weaker, distant, like the last movement of something settling into final form. The pressure on the walls increased slightly, then stabilized in a heavy, permanent way. The emitter failed. The light disappeared. But for a brief moment, before complete darkness, Alice stayed exactly where she was, between the cubs and the weight of the world above them. Then there was silence. Not immediate silence, but layered silence, the kind that comes after vibration stops, after energy fades, after systems no longer respond. It filled the canyon completely, as if the space itself had stopped listening. Outside, Noah tried the comm link again. No response. Ethan checked every channel. All dead. Noah slowly lowered his hands from the console. "She is gone," Ethan said, though he did not sound fully convinced. Noah did not correct him. He only looked at the frozen data point on the screen, where her last signal had been recorded. Inside the sealed canyon, nothing moved except dust settling onto stone. The cubs were still alive, huddled together in the dark where light had been moments before. The canyon did not stay silent forever. Long after the human signals vanished, long after the collapsed stone settled into its final shape, life returned to the broken place in a different form. Not quickly, not loudly, but in careful steps that came from instincts older than memory. The Varkai came back first. They moved through the outer fracture lines of the canyon with slow, controlled precision. Their bodies were built for harsh terrain, for tight spaces, for pressure that would break weaker species. But even they moved differently now, as if the place itself demanded caution. The pack stopped when they reached the sealed collapse. There was no sound from inside. No movement. No calls. Only the heavy weight of stone that had closed the canyon like a lid. For a long time, they did not dig. They did not claw. They simply stood still, reading the environment the way their kind understood truth, through scent, vibration, and absence. Something was wrong in the balance of the place. A few younger Varkai shifted uneasily. One made a low sound, uncertain. But the older ones did not react with aggression. Instead, they pressed closer to the rock, lowering their heads, as if listening. Then they began to dig. Not violently. Not like hunters tearing into prey. But carefully, removing stone piece by piece, following the broken structure rather than fighting it. The collapse was still unstable in places, but they moved with coordination that came from shared understanding. Hours passed. Then more. Finally, they reached the inner chamber. What they found did not trigger instinctual attack. Inside, the space was dim and still. Dust floated in slow patterns. The air was thin, but stable enough for survival for a short time after collapse. The cubs were there. Alive. Huddled together in a tight group, pressed into the only remaining sheltered corner of the chamber. They were weak, but breathing. Their small bodies reacted immediately to the presence of their kind. Soft calls filled the space again, fragile but real. The adult Varkai paused. But it was not the cubs that held their attention. A few steps away, partially covered in fallen stone and debris, lay the human. Dr. Alice Moore. She was still in the position she had taken when the structure failed completely. Her body was not in motion. The protective device she had used was broken, its parts scattered around her like fragments of a failed shell. One arm was positioned slightly outward, as if it had been holding something in place even at the end. The Varkai did not attack. They did not circle in aggression. They approached slowly. One of them, older than the rest, stepped forward first. It lowered its head close to the human, sniffing the air around her. Then it moved slightly closer, careful not to disturb the cubs behind her. Something about the scene was wrong in a way that was difficult to process. The human had not harmed the cubs. The human had not fled. The human had stayed. That idea did not belong in the Varkai understanding of the world. Everything in their experience followed the pattern of survival: strong survive, weak fall, threat removed when possible. But here, something had broken that pattern. The cubs pressed against the human side, still instinctively staying close to where protection had been. The pack did not move for a long time. Then, slowly, one of the younger Varkai stepped forward and pulled a piece of broken human equipment from the debris. It was a damaged tool, metal fractured, edges bent, power core dead. It had once been part of the field emitter system. The Varkai examined it. It did not understand human technology. But it understood impact. It understood meaning left behind in objects. The older Varkai made a low sound. A decision was made. They carried the broken tool out of the canyon. Back in their nesting grounds, the object was placed in the center of a gathering space. The Varkai did not use fire like humans, but they used controlled heat sources and mineral forging pits to shape tools. Over time, they learned to adapt materials found in fallen meteor fields and deep rock veins. The broken human tool was not repaired. It was changed. Metal was reforged around it. New edges were shaped. The form became a blade, not like their natural claws, but something made, something intentional. The structure of it was simple, but balanced. And on the surface of the blade, they marked a symbol. It was not fully understood. It was copied from the patterns left on the human's equipment. Lines, shapes, markings that meant identity. But to the Varkai, it became something more than identification. It became recognition. The first blade was complete. It was not used for hunting. It was not used for war. It was placed in the center of the pack grounds, standing upright in stone. Other Varkai clans heard of it. They came to see. At first, they did not believe the story. A human that did not run. A human that did not strike. A human that stayed until the end. But they saw the cubs, alive and grown stronger. They saw the blade. They saw the symbol. And slowly, something began to spread. Clans that once fought over territory began to hesitate when the symbol appeared in conflict zones. Not out of fear, but out of something less defined. A pause. A recognition that not all encounters needed to end in death. More blades were made. Each one slightly different, but all carrying the same mark. Across Karos, 9, predators that once knew only survival began to develop something unusual, restraint. They did not forget how to hunt. Years had passed since the canyon went silent. On Earth, the mission had been marked as lost. Dr. Alice Moore's name appeared in reports as a casualty of geological collapse, and Karos, 9 was slowly removed from active human exploration lists. Only scattered data fragments remained, weak transmissions, broken sensor logs, and one final message that never fully explained what had happened below the surface. They are still breathing. After that, there was nothing more. But space rarely forgets places where something important happened. So when a new expedition was approved, it was not sent to repeat the old mission. It was sent to verify what had changed. Commander Liam Reed led the return. He was not alone. With him came scientist Chloe Bennett and a small support crew trained for contact with non-human ecosystems. Their orders were simple: observe, confirm, and report. No interference unless survival demanded it. As their ship entered orbit, Karos, 9 looked the same at first glance. Vast rocky plains. Deep canyon systems. Wide stretches of broken terrain shaped by ancient seismic force. But as they scanned deeper, the team noticed something strange. Movement patterns were no longer random. They were structured. "What are those readings?" Chloe asked, leaning over the console. Liam studied the screen. "That's coordinated activity," he said slowly. "That's not instinct behavior." The landing zone was chosen near the original observation ridge. The same place where Alice's team had once set up their base. The ground below looked weathered, as if time had passed heavily over it, but not in destruction. In transformation. When they landed, the air felt different than recorded data suggested. Still cold, still thin, but carrying something new. A sense of presence. Not hostile. Not welcoming. Observing. The team moved carefully. At first, they expected silence. Empty terrain. Signs of abandoned predator activity. Instead, they found paths. Clear ones. Not natural trails, but deliberately maintained routes carved into stone. These paths led deeper into the canyon systems, branching like networks connecting multiple territories. Liam raised a hand. "Stay alert," he said. They followed the path. The first encounter came quickly. A group of Varkai appeared on a ridge above them. Larger than the cubs recorded in old data, clearly adults now. They did not attack. They did not retreat. They simply watched. One of them carried something. A blade. Human-made in origin, but altered. Forged metal reinforced with local minerals. On its surface, a marking was etched, simple, but unmistakable. A symbol copied from human design. Chloe froze slightly. "That's ours," she said. Liam nodded slowly. "It's modified, but yes." The Varkai did not move closer. Instead, after a long pause, they stepped back and disappeared into the ridge as silently as they had arrived. The team continued forward. As they traveled deeper into the region, the pattern repeated. Not attacks. Not avoidance. Observation. And always, the symbol. It appeared on tools, on stone markers, on carried weapons. Different clans, different regions, but the same mark repeated again and again. By the second day, the team reached what looked like a central gathering area. It was not a city. But it was not wilderness either. Large formations of Varkai gathered in structured groups. Some were resting. Some were interacting in coordinated movements that resembled communication rituals. And among them, blades were displayed in upright stone holders, as if they had meaning beyond use. Liam stepped forward carefully. No one stopped him. A path opened naturally through the gathering. Not forced. Not cleared. Just accepted. At the center stood a raised stone platform. On it, many blades were arranged in a circle. All marked with the same symbol. Chloe whispered, "Why are they doing this?" Liam did not answer immediately. Because he saw something else. Around the platform, different species of predators stood together. Not in conflict. Not in tension. They were not allies in the human sense. But they were not enemies either. Something had changed the rules that once defined them. An older Varkai stepped forward. It did not speak in human language. But a translation device attempted to interpret the vocal patterns. The output was imperfect, fragmented, but clear enough to understand meaning. She stayed. The words repeated again. She stayed. Another species echoed it in its own form of sound. Then another. She stayed. Chloe looked at Liam. They're all saying the same thing. Liam nodded, slowly scanning the blades, the markings, the gathering. It's not just a story to them, he said. It's a rule. The Varkai elder moved closer and placed one of the blades into Liam's hands. He hesitated before taking it. It was heavier than expected. Not just physically. It carried something in its structure, history shaped into metal. The symbol on it was worn, as if it had been touched many times. Chloe stepped closer. Liam, this isn't just culture. This is structured behavior across species. Liam looked around the gathering. Predators that should have been territorial. Should have been aggressive. Instead, they stood in shared silence. And at the center of it all was a human name that no one had spoken, but everyone seemed to understand. Alice Moore was not here. But her decision was. Her final action had become something larger than survival. It had become memory encoded into behavior across entire predator societies. Liam lowered the blade slightly. She didn't just save cubs, he said quietly. She changed how they see choice. The Varkai elder made one final sound. Not a call. Not a warning. Something closer to acknowledgement. And the entire gathering responded in unison, across species, across instincts that once would never have aligned. She stayed. The phrase did not fade. It stayed in the air, in the blades, in the silence that followed. And for the first time since humanity arrived on Keros 9, the planet did not feel like something waiting to be studied. It felt like something remembering.